That crime scene was just brutal and evil and just ugly.
Linda Slaten, remembered as a loving mother, was found dead in this home in 1981. It was a case that went cold for nearly 4 decades.
When two brothers who weren't sure whether their mother's murder would ever be solved got a chance to tell.
I freaked out. I started crying. I saw the whole crime scene right then and there as a 12-year-old kid.
I'd have died that night trying to save my mom, but I didn't hear nothing. And it's so hard to live with that.
That one case just bothered me, the way I saw that lady. He entered that window and he went out of that window. And that's where I got his print from.
Son of a bitch was walking the street.
He's out free.
We truly felt that the person that left his DNA behind was the person that actually killed her.
The boyfriend of Linda.
Certainly high on the list.
Her ex-husband was another one.
All you need is a DNA match.
A hit, that's all I needed, a hit in the database. And the further we went, the longer we went, the more discouraging you got, the hope started fading.
You can't lose your mom no worse than we lost our mom. It's a nightmare I wouldn't wish on nobody. I love you, bro.
Now, we can't undo the tragedy. We can never make up for what happened. The best outcome is that they get justice.
I may die, I never know who did this, you know?
Loved ones, and especially children of a murder victim, they need those answers.
No matter how many detectives we had to go through over the years, we was gonna let them know we're still here, and we want to know who killed our mom.
38 years after this brutal murder.
I just felt like it never would be solved.
38 years of more than 24 detectives coming up empty.
Every turn I was striking out.
How long did it take you
Chromosome 3, chromosome 4.
to solve this crime?
2 days.
On the morning of September 4th, 1981, you're going to walk 3 doors down and have a cup of coffee with your sister.
Right.
When Judy Butler knocked on her older sister's front door, Linda Slaten never answered. At the time, the sisters both lived in this Lakeland apartment complex.
So you started to walk back to your place, and what happened?
And I turn and I see that the screen is out of the window.
Linda's bedroom window was wide open. Judy walked over and looked inside.
And my vision comes across her.
Where was she?
She was laying, instead of up and down on the bed, she was laying crossways. And at first I thought maybe she was asleep. And then I just started screaming.
When police arrived, they found the partially nude body of Linda Slaten, 31, with a wire coat hanger wrapped around her neck. The killer had entered her bedroom through the open window. The crackle of police radios inside the small 2-bedroom apartment woke up Linda's 15-year-old son, Jeff, sleeping on a cot in the living room.
I asked him, what is going on? He said, police officers put on some clothes and go outside. And he made sure I went out the front door. And when I went out there, it looked like every cop in the state of Florida, news crews, and my Aunt Judy was out there crying. And she told me my mom had been murdered. And I just couldn't believe it.
In the apartment's 2nd bedroom, another officer woke up Linda's younger son, Tim. then 12 years old.
He goes, you need to wake up and go outside with your brother. He never mentioned my mom. I'm like, why are you not saying my mom? Why's the cop waking me up?
Still in his pajamas, Tim walked past his mother's closed bedroom door. Suddenly, it swung open as an officer left the room.
And I saw the whole crime scene. I mean, I saw my mom's bloody body with a coat hanger around her neck.
You can't unsee that.
No. And I still see it.
In 1974, Linda Slaten was a 24-year-old single mom, finally free. She had just divorced Jeff and Tim's abusive father, Frank Slaten, after 9 volatile years of marriage.
He was a violent alcoholic, to be honest with you.
Yes.
Did he hit your mom?
No, yeah.
In the years that followed, nothing was easy for the young family. Linda struggled for work, made her own clothes to save money, and couldn't afford a car.
If you couldn't get a ride to practice, who would take you?
Coach, come pick us up.
That's Coach Joe, as the kids called him. He often drove Tim and some other boys to and from football practice. On the last full day of her life, Linda and Jeff argued. Tensions had been rising with her teenage son.
I remember coming home, there wasn't nothing to eat in the house. But you know how it is when you're a 15, 16-year-old kid, you're mouthy, and I got mad and I went out the door and got on my bicycle and rode 11 or 12 miles to the north side of town to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house to get something to eat.
At 8:30 that night, Tim came home from football practice.
The coach brought me home.
Around 9, Linda took Tim to a party next door to play cards.
Grandma and Grandpa brought me home about, I think it was around 9 or 9:30 or so.
Linda and Tim came home about 11. By midnight, Jeff made up with his mom, he says, and still remembers their final moment together.
She was washing the dishes and stuff when she went to go to her bedroom. I said, I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow, you know.
What do you remember about the Slaten case?
I can remember everything about it. Going to that window, looking at it where he went through it. Then I went in there and the children was asleep. And I saw that coat hanger around her neck.
Former Sergeant Edgar Pickett, now 94 years old, was a legendary fingerprint expert with the Lakeland Police Department. He led the crime scene unit. In fact, the crime lab bears his name. But that sort of recognition was a long time coming. Arriving at the Slaten crime scene in 1981, Pickett, then 53, was just a year away from retirement. But his hard-earned reputation had never spared him from prejudice.
So you pull up at the scene, and another detective says what to you?
That a black man don't have any business looking at a naked white woman.
Even though she was a homicide victim.
That's correct.
Sergeant Pickett believed Linda Slaten had been strangled with a coat hanger from her own closet. He dusted most of the bedroom for fingerprints, even the floor.
And then I got that print off of that window sill. It was a palm print, wasn't a fingerprint.
You got the most important print there is.
I knew it.
The evidence Pickett uncovered would play a crucial role decades later, especially the palm print.
I really had never seen anybody in the shape that that lady was in. And I've seen a lot of people killed.
An autopsy later confirmed what he already knew. Linda Slaten had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Swabs taken and preserved in a rape kit revealed semen. That morning, Pickett says, his thoughts kept returning to Linda Slaten's boys.
I had children too. And I really wanted to clear that case. I did.
You guys are standing on the spot where your life changed.
Yes, right
When I
here.
stopped being a kid, it was right there.
You were 15.
15.
You really felt like this was the end of your childhood right here?
Yes, sir. I think exactly what it did is when Mad Judy told my mom been murdered.
Emerging through the terror and tears that September morning 41 years ago, the questions kept coming. Why? Who? Who could have done such an evil thing? On that late summer morning in 1981, Jeff and Tim Slaten faced a frightening world they no longer recognized, a world without their mother.
How do 12 and 15-year-old boys process that, deal with that?
It was hard.
Yeah, I thought about committing suicide a couple times. It was that bad.
The brothers moved in with their grandparents, Clarence and Margaret Harris.
We stayed in the house. We didn't go anywhere.
Scared to death, didn't know
Scared
who
to
it was.
death, you know, to do anything.
For those first terrifying days, the family slept in the same room, except Grandpa Harris.
And he would stay in guard with a gun all night while we slept.
The grandparents hoped a quick return to familiar routines would help their distraught grandsons. A few weeks after their mom's funeral, the boys were back in school.
And just, you know, being with friends and just started living life again, I guess. You know, going back to football.
His teammates, and Coach Joe in particular, were always supportive, always rooting for him, says Tim.
And I looked up to this guy. He was my assistant football coach. I rides to games, rides to practice.
Tim's team football photo hung in his bedroom. It was taken just 1 month after the murder. The picture was a reminder, he says, of something his mom had taught him, to keep moving forward and never give up.
She was a fighter.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
She might have weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, but she was pretty tough.
Everybody liked her that met her. Everybody was asking her for a date because she was so young and pretty.
And then Linda met and married Frank Slaten.
He was a mean, no-count scoundrel.
The brothers say it's hard to know when their dad began to beat their mom. The more he drank, the more violent he became.
Yeah, I remember one time he was in the bathroom. He had her by the throat with a gun to her head, and I was coming there trying to get him off of her. I felt like it saved her that night, that day.
But you were just a little guy yourself.
Yeah, I was only 6.5, 7 years old.
Frank Slaten's history of abuse made him a person of interest for Lakeland detectives. But investigators seem satisfied that Slaten was home in Alabama on the night of the murder. At the time of her death, Linda had a boyfriend. He, too, had a credible alibi. Others were looked at, like the partygoers next door, but no one was charged.
The Lakeland Police Department, they used to come down and take me out of school, and they was always interrogating me all the time.
In the early days, it sounds like, who the police really were most thorough in checking out
It was me.
As a 15-year-old, Jeff had plenty of typical teen conflicts with his mom, which he readily admitted to detectives, including that heated argument on the last day of her life.
You know, they had me put me on a lie detector test one time, and I passed it. Then they wanted to do it again. They just wanted to put me under hypnosis. And then there's one time, one of the cops, he's like, "You got big arms on you, and you're strong enough to put your hands around your mom's neck and kill her?" Who would do that to a kid? I was a 15-year-old kid hurting. And say that to me. I mean, that's always hurt.
Finally, Jeff's grandparents said, enough.
It's like, get out there and find who killed my daughter. Leave this kid, leave his family alone.
2 weeks later, according to the Lakeland police report, Jeff took a second polygraph test and was cleared. At that point, the investigation slowed, then ground to a halt. As the years passed, Jeff and Tim started their own families. But to this day, there is still grief and guilt for not hearing anything that night, for not coming to their mom's rescue.
I'd have died that night trying to save my mom. But I mean, we're right there in the house. How can you not hear something like that?
And they lived in fear of the man they called the monster. Unless he was dead, he was out there, somewhere. Around the 20th anniversary of their mom's murder, Jeff and Tim met with Lakeland detective Brad Grice, who was taking a fresh look at the case.
As soon as Jeff and Tim walked in the door, I realized I'd known Jeff for years, since I was in my 20s. Through bowling.
I was like, Brad. Sure enough, I knew him from bowling years ago.
Grice took DNA samples from the brothers to clear them again, then gave Jeff something in return, a promise.
He made me promise that I wouldn't retire until I solved his mother's case. And I wanted to so bad for him and his brother. I did.
Grice had already sent DNA from the Slaten rape kit to the state's major crime lab at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the FDLE.
Do you have any confidence that you could solve it?
I was hoping DNA would. You know, it was becoming a big tool.
By March 1999, the FDLE had developed a full DNA profile of Linda Slaten's anonymous killer.
All you need is a DNA match.
A hit. That's all I needed, a hit in the database.
Detective Grice took dozens of DNA samples from prior persons of interest, submitting them to the FDLE for comparison.
We were trying everything.
Even the brothers' father, Frank Slaten, who had stopped drinking, volunteered a sample. None matched. Then in September 2001, Grice got a tip. Nearly a year after the Slaten killing, a 24-year-old man named Jimmy Ulmer pulled a 10-year-old girl through her bedroom window and nearly killed her.
He was convicted of that and sentenced to like 80 years in prison.
The savage assault seemed eerily similar to the Slaten case, and Detective Grice discovered that, around the time of Linda Slaten's murder, Jimmy Ulmer had been staying with a friend who happened to live in the very same apartment complex as Slaten.
Hang on. Jimmy Ulmer was staying in an apartment right across the way from the Slatens?
Yes.
You must have felt like that's our guy.
I felt very strong. I did.
Ulmer had died in prison 5 years earlier, in 1996, but Grice got a DNA sample from his mother.
I honestly felt that when we got the results back that we would know who did it and we get the notice that it wasn't him.
At that point, you must have been like, we're never going to solve this thing.
I sure felt that way. It was very discouraging.
You know, it's like, oh my God, we're back to square one again.
You feel like he's on a roller coaster for pretty much your whole life.
By 2005, Detective Grice was heading up a new cold case unit, and the FBI was running the DNA profile of Slaten's killer continuously through all federal data banks. But the years continued to pass without a match.
Jeff would call, and Jeff, I got nothing for you, you know. It hurt my heart too, you know.
Grice had a growing suspicion he was chasing a ghost.
I honestly thought the suspect might be deceased.
He had made that promise to the brothers that he wouldn't retire until their monster was caught.
I had some medical things that were popping up.
It was a promise he couldn't keep. Detective Grice retired in 2015.
There was probably nothing in your professional life you wanted more than to call Jeff Slaten and say, got him.
Absolutely.
After Detective Brad Grice retired, I was like, well, I'm probably gonna take my last breath and not know who murdered my mom. I was already starting to come to terms with it.
But 3 years later, there was renewed hope. A groundbreaking DNA technology began to electrify the law enforcement community, and genetic genealogist C.C. Moore was taking on the Slaten case.
I was determined I was going to help these boys find out who killed their mom.
See more photos from the case at 48hours.com.
Cece Moore is a renowned expert in the field of investigative genetic genealogy.
If you have that DNA, there is no reason you cannot solve that mystery, whatever that mystery is.
Moore launched her hunt for Linda Slaten's killer by uploading the anonymous DNA from Slaten's rape kit to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch. She then meticulously constructed, branch by branch, his genetic family tree.
I built the family trees of those people who share DNA with him, and then I identify common ancestors between those people.
She made those connections by poring over birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries, and social media to fill in the family tree with names.
It sounds like basically you're putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Yes. My work is constantly putting together puzzles, piece by piece by piece. These matches all share DNA with each other, so they're my first genetic network.
Cece Moore uncovered 3 genetic networks, branches of the killer's family tree that ultimately narrowed to the one person most likely responsible for the murder of Linda Slaten.
Fortunately, those 3 genetic networks converged into one family tree that pointed at one immediate family, and he was the only son in that family. And we knew the killer was a male, so it had to be him that was the DNA contributor.
After hundreds of leads and dead ends, after dozens of suspects were investigated and cleared, Cece Moore identified the probable killer in one weekend.
There was just one person who was high confidence.
And who was that?
Joseph Clinton Mills.
Joseph Clinton Mills, Coach Joe, who drove Linda Slaten's 12-year-old son, Tim, to and from practice. But authorities wanted to be certain before they notified the brothers.
And then there is a sort of exhilaration because he's alive. And so there's a real chance for justice and maybe even answers.
Cece Moore's final 2019 report confirmed that Joseph Mills, then 58, was living in Kathleen, Florida, about half an hour from the crime scene.
And I reviewed the case, and I'm like, I remember that name. I remember seeing that name. That guy was interviewed.
Detectives Tammy Hathcock and Russell Hurley were the next generation of Lakeland investigators leading the Slaten cold case.
I'm telling you, it's like I won the lottery. I remember grabbing that piece of paper from the report and just running down the hallway to my sergeant saying, oh my God, he was interviewed, he was interviewed.
According to the case file, investigators did question Joseph Mills, then 20 years old, just one day after the murder.
He was very basically touched. I mean, like just a very brief interview.
And it was conducted on the phone, not in person. The fact that investigators never questioned Mills face-to-face suggests he was never considered a suspect. During the brief call, Mills acknowledged he had driven Tim Slaten home from football practice on September 3rd. Just hours later, Linda Slaten was dead.
How was Joseph Mills not followed up on more aggressively in 1981?
At that point, I mean, he was just a football coach that had dropped off Timmy. He was never on their radar to be a suspect, just based off of the information that they were given by Timmy and by Mr. Mills.
Joseph Mills, seen here in a 1984 driver's license photo, was convicted that year of grand theft for forging a will. He never went to jail, but he was fingerprinted. Lakeland police also took a palm print. In August 2019, investigators compared those prints to the one Sergeant Pickett lifted off Slaten's windowsill nearly 38 years before.
When the prints came back, there was a match?
Yes.
High-tech genetic genealogy had identified Mills as the likely killer, and an old-fashioned palm print match helped confirm his identity. But Hathcock and Hurley still needed to compare a fresh DNA sample from Mills to the decades-old DNA recovered from the crime scene.
As we had to get his DNA without his knowledge and see if we can get a match. We had to do some surveillance.
It was several weekends that we were following him around trying to get discarded.
Just looking for a cup that he drank from or a tissue that he used.
Anything.
After tracking Mills with no luck, the detectives decided it was time to get their hands dirty. They covertly took Mills' trash back to the police department.
Here we are in dress clothes, just digging through trash bags. Not the most glamorous thing.
They discovered a piece of used medical adhesive tape and sent it off to the FDLE crime lab for testing. After searching Mills' trash, they dug through his life.
He's been married to the same woman, and he lived in the same place.
He was a business owner, a cleaning service.
Was a truck driver over the years. He had a family.
Married, kids.
Married, kids, grandkids.
11 days later, the stunning lab results. Joseph Mills' 2019 DNA found on the medical tape and the 1981 unknown DNA from Linda Slaten's rape kit were a spot-on match. That's when the brothers were told the monster had been found.
This guy you last knew as Coach Joe, oh my goodness, it was him.
And I had a picture of my house ever since then. I never knew it was him.
Tim's 1981 team football photo, a source of pride for years, sickens him today because standing directly behind him is the man he once trusted and admired, Coach Joe.
I've been carrying the killer's picture in my house this whole time and never had a clue.
Even after the murder, Joseph Mills continued driving Tim to and from football practice, picking him up and dropping him off at his grandparents' house.
He'd ask us how the case was going. He wouldn't ask questions about it. He just, what, is any new news or any new leads? And I was like, no, nothing, you know.
He's talking to a 12-year-old boy and trying to keep tabs on a murder investigation through the son of the murdered woman?
Yeah.
Yes.
When he knows exactly who did it?
He's a cold-hearted monster, that's for sure.
December 12th, 2019. The detectives moved in, arresting Joseph Mills.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law.
He was calm, cool, and collective like it was another day on the beach. Most people's reaction would be, why am I being arrested?
Why are you taking me in? You expected some of that.
Right.
Yes.
Some kind of emotion, and nothing.
It's been 38 years, and I'm sure you go to bed every night thinking about this. I have no doubt in my mind.
Detectives Hathcock and Hurley finally had Joseph Mills right where they wanted him, in the claustrophobic confines of a police interview room.
When I picked the boys up, we stayed in the vehicle. And I don't recall of going to in or out of a house, period.
There's no way that is the truth. I mean, he's saying he's never been in there. We got him.
What we have tells us a different story, okay? You were in that apartment.
Ratcheting up the pressure, the detectives told Mills they had overwhelming evidence placing him inside Linda Slaten's bedroom.
Your fingerprints matches you, the DNA matches you.
That's when Mills' story began to change.
And then how did you end up going through her window?
It was like an invitation.
An invitation from Linda Slaten, Mills claimed, for consensual sex. A flat-out lie, say the detectives.
He said it was a sex game, that she had the hanger around her neck when he came through the window, and she asked him to tighten it down.
And then did you start applying pressure?
Yes.
And when I pointed out, well, the brutality of the hanger and how deep it was into her skin, he stuck with it was a game.
You purposely killed her. We're all sitting here, we know that.
At the end of the day, what happened here?
I think it's pretty evident that he targeted her.
After dropping off Tim from football practice on September 3rd, 1981, Joseph Mills returned later that night, the detectives say, breaking in through Linda Slaten's bedroom window. No one heard Mills, they believe, because no one was home. Jeff was still at his grandparents' house. Linda and Tim were at the party next door.
If you look at the crime scene and all that, the hanger obviously came from the closet. We figured that's what happened, is he was hiding in the closet.
Were you ever in the closet?
No, sir.
In the final moments of her life, the detectives believe that Linda, after saying goodnight to her sons, walked into her bedroom and closed the door, never knowing that Mills was already inside, waiting for her. There was no invitation, no consensual sex, they say. Joseph Mills raped and murdered Linda Slaten. Detective Brad Grice always suspected the killer's name was buried somewhere in the thick police case file.
Why do you feel that the investigation didn't circle back to Joseph Mills?
Well, obviously I put a lot of that on me now.
You do?
I do.
Grice blames himself for not taking a harder look at Joseph Mills, a sentiment not shared by the Slaten brothers. They feel nothing but gratitude to the detective and friend who spent 17 years chasing the elusive killer.
I could tell how hard he wanted to solve it, and I actually named my son after him. My son's named Brad, too.
Here's Brad Slaten, graduating from high school.
Jeff put a little pressure on me over the years, you know, he did. You can't retire until you solve this case, and then he names his son after me, and honestly, I just wanted to solve this case for them more than anything.
How both of you doing?
How you doing?
All right.
So did this former investigator, 94-year-old Edgar Pickett. The brothers had always wanted to meet him.
So I want to thank you for all you did for our mom back then. If we hadn't have done it, this monster would still be running free today.
Sure would. I'm sure.
It is poignant praise for Sergeant Pickett, who lifted the palm print that helped identify the monster, Joseph Mills.
That's a case I can never forget. It's up here.
Yeah.
I can't get rid of it.
During his distinguished and trailblazing 29-year career, Sergeant Pickett had seen it all. And yet it's the Linda Slaten case that haunts him to this day. He never knew police had questioned a man named Joseph Mills just one day after the killing.
You didn't know for 38 years that he was talked to immediately afterward?
No, I didn't.
Instead, Pickett says he was asked to compare prints of a number of black men who were questioned in the days after the murder, following neighbors' reports of suspicious activity.
They kept picking up a lot of blacks, and they was giving me their prints for me to look at theirs.
It not just haunts, but angers Pickett. Black men were rounded up and fingerprinted while the white football coach driving Linda's son to and from practice was never considered a suspect.
They just talked to him and let him go.
You're telling me this case could have been solved in the first days after the murder if they had just taken a print from Joseph Mills?
That's correct.
There's a lot of people who came before you, I get it. But you got this palm print in the windowsill almost immediately. Wouldn't you just get some prints from the guy? Anybody who had been near the house in the 24 hours prior to the murder?
There was no indication that he had been in the house. I mean, all the witnesses said that he dropped the kid off from practice and never got out of the truck. So the only reason why he was spoke to was because when they backtrack on the previous 24 hours, he was in that equation.
You don't feel like he slipped through the net?
No.
No.
Joseph Mills' day of reckoning would finally come 40 years later.
He's got cold black murdering eyes. It's Joseph Clinton Mills. He just sit there, not a word.
What do you make of Coach Joe's story of what happened that night? Join the conversation now on social media.
Our mom was a good person. He took that away from us.
To avoid a trial and a possible death sentence, Joseph Mills pleaded guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder, sexual battery, and burglary. At his sentencing, what Linda Slaten's family wanted most was the answer to one question.
Why? I just want to know why, Joe. Why'd you take my mama from me? I love my mama. We was happy.
My blood would start boiling every time I look at him.
The brothers and Aunt Judy tried to look him in the eye.
See if there was any human being in there, see if he was alive, see if he had a soul. Never saw it.
His silence infuriated the family, and a few minutes later, so did his comments to the court.
I am a good person. I'm not that person that they're painting me out to be.
I think this case made me the angriest out of the hundreds of cases I've been involved in, because what he did with her children there, and then the things he said about her.
That she lured him in.
Even all these years later, he was willing to try to make her look bad, to denigrate the victim. And her boys have to hear that. It's just sickening.
I will sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And just like that, Joseph Clinton Mills was gone, facing 4 life terms, and finally, a measure of justice.
Maybe not full justice in your view.
Not full justice by no means. I wanted to go to trial. I wanted to see him up on the stand and tell everybody why he did this. And he never did that.
The Slaten brothers feel some comfort knowing Joseph Mills will never leave prison alive. But there's still anger, they say, because Mills never took full responsibility for the premeditated rape and murder of their mother. He never apologized, and there were all those years of freedom.
He lived his whole life. He raised his family. You know, he had a good life. That was right after she was killed. We went back.
It's the brothers who feel they were handed the far more severe sentence, life without the possibility of growing up with their mom.
She'd still be here today. She'd only be 72, you know, and could have had her my whole life. I just wonder what life would have been like to have that.
Any part of you, when you think about all of this, at all angry with the way the police handled it, that it took this long to get Joseph Mills?
You could look at it that way. I know it's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that people don't see that goes on. You know what they do, the hours upon hours they put in. I mean, you could get mad at, but only so much can be done in a day.
We owe a huge debt of gratitude to those original crime scene investigators, because at the time this crime was committed, they didn't even know DNA was going to be used in criminal investigations. And so the fact they collected that and then it was stored responsibly and carefully all these years by that department is so important. If that hadn't happened, we couldn't have done our work.
Jeff and Tim say they're determined to move on as best they can, to live life well for their mom and for their families. The brothers also know they never would have survived their ordeal without each other.
Just check it out, bro.
They remain extremely close, live just a few miles apart, and share passionate hobbies like restoring cars.
You give the credit for living this life to the spirit of your mom.
Yes, most definitely. Sure do love you, Mom. I miss you so much every day. My mom, she's looking down on us and want us to live our lives and do good, you know, and I always think she's looking down on us, and I want to make her proud.
Yes.
I want to make her proud.
Yes.
A mother of 3, alone in her home.
It was an execution. This was somebody who was there with a purpose.
A shadowy figure seen on camera puts a neighborhood on edge.
Were people scared that there was a killer loose?
Definitely.
48 Hours, next on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
How old were you when you were adopted?
I was 9, and that's what I wanted. I want to feel loved, and I want a family.
I wanted a lot of children. You see your friends having children, and you try, and you can't. It was difficult.
When we finally learned that we were going to be able to go over to Russia and pick up a little boy and girl of our own, it was just a tremendous event.
And we were very excited. We had seen pictures of the children, and they were beautiful.
How did the agency describe Carolee?
A wonderful, outgoing, intelligent little girl, loved to be around all ages of children, and desperately looking for parents.
Was that an accurate description?
No, it was not.
No. After we returned home, we would see her staring off into the distance blankly in a trance-like state. She started to stand over our bed at night.
I'd wake up and she'd be right over my face. There was a coldness in her and an anger and just a distance. She became someone I didn't know at all. I mean, at all. Carolee began stealing everything in the house. She stole all my jewelry. Our knives were disappearing. She would do things like putting a kitten in the middle of a pack of dogs. Cruel type behavior.
And then she snapped and tried to kill Joshua.
She had him in her hands and was going to throw him over the deck.
She had him
Yes. Yes.
over the side here?
Yes. And I just started screaming, "Put him down, Carolee! Put him down! What are you doing? I'm gonna kill him." I called the psychiatrist. What am I gonna do? You know, what do we do? She's becoming violent.
Doctor, there is no question in your mind that Carolee is a very troubled little girl.
No, there's no question in my mind about it at all. This child I would consider to be a homicide risk.
She's been on all kinds of medication, and none of it has worked. We've had cameras installed, and we've had alarms installed on her doors. You know, I don't know what the solution is. What am I gonna do? We're gonna get you the best help we can, okay?
I did not try to kill my brother. I love him. Mama and Daddy just don't understand it.
I've done many stories during the course of my career, but this was one that really stuck with me. You want to rescind the adoption?
We feel like we tried everything.
It hit me in my heart. So you plan on taking Carolee back to Russia?
Yes.
Yes.
I felt helpless leaving her behind. I didn't know what would become of her. You're a strong girl. A strong girl. You're gonna be fine, okay? Don't cry.
Oh, Joshua. I don't see him, Mama. Did you?
More than 2 decades ago, an American couple adopted this little girl from Russia.
30 seconds ago, he was terrified of her.
They soon came to believe she was dangerous,
Can't you hurry?
even capable of murder. You take care, okay? Be strong. I was with them when they brought her back to Russia and left her. Covering the story changed my life and left me steeped in a haunting mystery that began when the couple first arrived in Moscow, hoping to find the perfect child.
I think it's innate in every woman to want to be a good parent, to have children, and to share your life.
There's Crystal. She's tired.
Often comments would be made about, well, when are you going to have children? It was hard. We thought this is going to be a wonderful journey.
Moscow, 1997. Crystal and Jesse, we agreed not to use their last name, are both 30 and have tried for years to have a child of their own.
It was something we really wanted to do. We wanted to parent, and we really wanted a house full.
Far away from home, they're finally about to become parents.
We really wanted to give a child an opportunity.
Adoptive parents.
I was adopted myself. I know the benefits that adoption can bring.
They found their daughter on an adoption agency's webpage posted on the internet.
She was a beautiful child.
For them, she was the perfect child, a blonde, blue-eyed 9-year-old.
We thought, this is an older child we can give a normal life.
Before leaving for Russia, the adoption agency gave them the little girl's medical records.
The agency described Carolee as a wonderful, outgoing, intelligent little girl who was charming to be around.
You understood, though, that adopting an older child carries certain risks.
Absolutely.
Certain risks.
They took an 8-hour train ride from Moscow to an orphanage in the small town of Borovichi. They already paid nearly $30,000 to make all the necessary arrangements. And the child they called Carolee was anxiously awaiting their arrival.
She looked in my eyes very warmly. You're my mama.
She called you mama?
She did from the very beginning. My American mama, she said.
At the orphanage, the couple would not only adopt Carolee, they also found her a baby brother, a 3-year-old they would name Joshua.
It was exciting.
But there were signs that the road ahead might be rocky.
We did see the anger, but it could be explained. Certainly a child arriving to a new culture, a new family, leaving her home. That's the only thing she's ever known.
Back in the United States, the family settled into a brand new home in a comfortable suburb of Atlanta, a short commute to Jesse's computer engineering job.
We tried to make it very homey for her and happy.
She's a little princess, Daddy.
We tried to give her everything we thought a little girl should have.
But the beautiful little girl was having big problems.
As soon as we brought her home, she was very, very withdrawn and isolating. Didn't cry at all, but just very angry.
It was nothing, they thought, a little love couldn't fix.
I spent all the time with her. I quit my job. I gave her 100% of me.
It wasn't working. They say off camera, she started acting badly.
She just began becoming very destructive.
Ho, ho, ho.
Then the unthinkable happened. On Carolee's second Christmas in America.
Woo!
Things seem to have started off well.
Carolee's got a new bike, and we were learning how to ride it. She had never ridden one before.
You're doing it, see?
I really thought that everything was going great.
It was not long after when Crystal heard the horrible sound.
So I was over planting, and I heard Joshua screaming.
Crystal says that's when she first saw Carol Lee holding her 4-year-old brother Joshua over the railing of the 30-foot-high deck.
She had him
Yes. Yes.
over the side here?
Yes.
This wasn't roughhousing.
No. In her face, there was anger and hate.
Crystal says that moment changed everything.
Kill him, she said. Why? I'm mad at him. What did he do? He's getting on my nerves. I said, you would kill him for trying to get on your nerves? Surely you don't mean it. You don't mean kill him. And she said, yes, I do.
What, can you do this?
I can do that.
We asked Joshua about it.
Are you afraid of Carol Lee?
Yes, because she tried to throw me off the deck.
Because she tried to throw you off the deck?
Yes. That's why I'm afraid of her.
Are you worried that she's going to do something to you right now? Because she's not. Mommy's here.
Crystal and Jesse's relationship with Carol Lee was in free fall after the incident involving Joshua on the family's 30-foot outdoor deck.
She started telling me, I'm hearing voices and I'm seeing things. She says when the voices tell her to do something, she has to do it or they'll hurt her. And the voices, she said, told her to kill him.
She was hallucinating that she was seeing snakes.
The couple had her admitted to a psychiatric hospital. She spent almost 4 months under constant care before Crystal and Jesse say their insurance started running out, and they were forced to bring Carol Lee back into their home again.
This is what you see.
Yes.
She's repeated this for months, on multiple occasions. If I get another chance, I will kill him.
And she told us that too.
Try to kill Joshua.
So they're installing an elaborate security system.
So you have cameras installed at various points in the house, right?
Yes, in the living room, her bedroom, her bathroom.
Carol Lee is forbidden to be alone with Joshua.
Is he safe? No?
That's what I mean. I had to get help.
That's why you have to get out.
She is a risk to the family members.
Dr. Brian Kennedy was one of the psychiatrists who saw Carol Lee.
She's got a tremendous amount of rage and anger that she's hidden inside her. There's clear evidence of a clinical depression. There's definitely clear evidence of an attachment disorder. Now, there may be other developing psychiatric difficulties, such as bipolar illness or schizophrenia.
She was given heavy medication. But they say the medications aren't working.
We're going to get you the best help we can, okay? It's going to be all right.
You love her, but you're frightened of her.
Yes. The anger that she has focused towards Joshua is like something I've never seen before.
Mommy's not ever going to let her hurt you.
4-year-old boys should never have to ask their parents the question, why did my sister try to kill me?
But since being home from the psychiatric hospital, there's already been another frightening incident. They say Carol Lee tried strangling the family dog, Aurora.
We woke up at 3 in the morning and Aurora was hung from her collar with the leash tied to a pole.
I'm going to go to my grandma's today.
So Joshua's being sent 600 miles away to live at his grandmother's house in Texas.
Why do we have to send him to Grandma's to keep him safe?
Because I may hurt him.
Just imagine, you think you're bringing a bright girl to your home, but no one's told you that they're sociopathic and they have no conscience.
In fact, they say the agency that arranged Carol Lee's adoption, the Frank Foundation, told them the opposite.
Carol Lee is emotionally nice, she's open, she's tender, she's obedient, she's friendly.
Nothing in that sentence would lead you to question, wow, could there be, a tremendous variety of hidden medical issues here?
It was a glowing report, except for one thing.
They did say she was a schizophrenic.
Translated then as mental retardation. But the couple says they asked about it and were told not to worry.
They stated that it was developmental delay, just slow to learn. And we were assured that this child was healthy and that in a good home with proper nutrition, with the best of doctors in America, helping her with the developmental issues, that she should be fine.
Only after the adoption was official, Crystal and Jesse say, did the Frank Foundation provide them with more documents that revealed troubling things about Carolee's past.
It says the mother was amoral and antisocial. You know, these types of words are very loaded. They carry a lot of psychological meaning.
The new documents described how Carolee's birth mother left her dirty, hungry, and in rags. Crystal and Jesse believe the mistreatment had a lasting effect on Carolee.
When I dreamed of adopting a little girl, this was not my dream. We would not have adopted the child.
You would not have adopted her?
No,
we would not have.
And as they continued digging into Carolee's past, they found out more. Officials at the orphanage say Carolee was in a special dorm for children with mental disabilities. Critical information, the couple says, the adoption agency failed to share with them.
You didn't hide any information?
Never. And why would I?
Back then, Nina Kostina, a Russian emigre, ran the Frank Foundation. She said the medical information she received was limited by Russian privacy laws, but adoptive parents once in Russia can get anything they need.
Once the parents are in the orphanage, they have access to any medical records, to the doctors, to anything. And this is their time when they should ask any questions.
So it's their fault?
I'm not telling fault, I'm telling that this is their obligation, this is lifetime decision. They should do it while they're in the orphanage.
When we first covered this story more than 2 decades ago, Nina Kostina said that no information had been withheld from the family. But at the time, 48 Hours spoke with 8 families who adopted through the Frank Foundation, and they all said they had received inaccurate medical information. Their children had been diagnosed with illnesses like fetal alcohol syndrome, hepatitis C, brain tumors, and a slew of psychological problems they claim the Frank Foundation didn't prepare them for. 3 of the families who spoke with sued but lost. Crystal and Jesse feel like they're out of options. So as Joshua leaves for the safety of his grandmother's home in Texas,
Oh, I'm gonna miss you so much.
they make a painful decision.
We cannot continue to be her parents.
They say the only way their son can return home is to send Carolee away forever.
We've been here every day loving her, nurturing her, helping her. We couldn't save her.
Time to go get your picture made, Carolee.
She has so many psychological problems.
What we're going to do is we're going to get your picture made today.
She is a danger to society, but more than that, she is a danger to our son.
So you still like to get your picture taken after all this time?
I like it.
The fact of the matter is that we cannot be her parents anymore.
1, 2, 3.
Crystal and Jesse are about to do something that's difficult to imagine.
Honey, did you want to see it?
They are taking Carolee back to Russia.
And John.
There are parents out there that will not be able to understand what you're about to do.
If I hadn't been in this position myself, I might have been stating the very same thing that I expect to hear from them. How could you do this? How could you do this? It's a long trip. You need stuff to color.
There must be a family somewhere in America that would adopt her.
We thought that there would be a family out there.
How are you today?
And we've actually spoken to a few families. In every case so far, after reviewing the medical information,
She tried to throw my son off a very high deck.
they've said thanks, but no thanks.
They have told Carolee they're taking her to a new hospital.
How long are we going to stay in there?
But she has no idea it's a psychiatric hospital in Russia.
This 12-year-old girl has been abandoned by her birth parents, and now her adoptive parents are also rejecting her.
Well, it's not a case of her adoptive parents rejecting her.
But that's what she's going
It's
to
going to be a
interpret
case
it as.
of her adoptive parents not being able to care for her.
What's wrong, honey? But you have to understand, psychiatrists tell us that Carol Lee has no bonding, no affection.
It's okay.
I think the best thing in the world for her is a good night's sleep.
I do too. So Carol Lee most likely will just move on.
It looks cruel to me, cruel and not thoughtful.
Nina Costina, the woman who arranged Carol Lee's adoption, is distraught over the decision.
I feel very sorry for her.
For her part, she questions whether Carol Lee is even that sick.
They say that she tried to kill her little brother.
This is what they
said
say.
She tried to kill the family dog. That she's extremely violent.
That's what they say, yes.
Do you believe it?
That's what they say.
Psychiatrist Brian Kennedy says Carol Lee suffers from attachment disorder, in effect, an inability to love. And that, he says, makes her dangerous.
It's hard for me to digest because when I look at her, she seems like a very sweet little girl who smiles and laughs.
She does love to smile and laugh, and I think in certain situations that are non-stressful for her, she presents as a very amiable child. But I think when you look at what she's been through, and when you see how she functions under stress, she can become very different and have very significant rage. She has thought about killing her brother. She has tried to kill him, and she could not give me assurances that she wouldn't kill him.
Others who treated Carol Lee had concerns as well, but at least one psychiatrist had another opinion. After treating Carol Lee, he wrote, Carol Lee's behavior was impeccable. He said the staff perceived that Crystal and Jesse were too often cool and distant towards their daughter, and that Carol Lee at times appeared to be frightened by her interactions with them.
Carol Lee is a very different person when you really get to know her. It took me a year and a half to break through the facade.
They have made up their minds. Carol Lee must return to Russia.
The doctors in America have told me that if she returns home, she will kill my son. I believe them. She's already tried it once. It's a very strong possibility she'll try it again with success.
They tapped into their life savings to bring Carol Lee here to be treated by Russian doctors.
They have worked with kids from Russian orphanages.
They found a bed for Carol Lee at this children's psychiatric hospital in Moscow. But they don't hold out much hope, and they're now thinking about annulling the adoption.
Doctors suspected they were trying to abandon her and demanded copies of their passports and made them promise to return for Carol Lee in 2 months.
Carol Lee understands that she is here to be treated by Russian specialists.
And that's all she's here for at the time.
But she does not understand that you will not be returning for her.
No, that's not the case. At this time, the only thing we're stating is that she's here for a diagnosis and an evaluation.
But Carol Lee senses something is terribly wrong.
They tell me that last night they love me and everything. I told them I love them very much, but they didn't know that. But they didn't believe me.
Then, just a few minutes before she'll enter the hospital, Carol Lee tells me something she's never told me before.
I did not try to kill my brother.
That she never tried to kill her brother Joshua.
You didn't try to kill Joshua? You're telling me the truth?
I just tried to just pick him up, that's all. Because he was too heavy.
Carol Lee says it was all a big misunderstanding.
I did not try to kill my brother. I love him. Mom and Daddy just don't understand it.
But there's no turning back.
You've pursued every possible avenue, and this is the only thing you can do.
This is the only thing we can do.
Ready?
Come on, honey.
Crystal and Jesse left her there. Days later, I returned with a hidden camera and visited Carol Lee.
Hey! Hi!
Now in a locked ward.
I don't feel safe staying here.
She was frightened.
I want to go back to America. I'm scared staying here.
But Crystal and Jesse have made a final decision.
Now we're heading back to the airport. It's been a long trip.
Good old USA.
They're not bringing Carolee back.
Hey! Hi!
The last time I saw Carolee was in Russia more than 20 years ago.
She was terrified.
She was in a locked ward in a children's psychiatric hospital.
The door slammed shut, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever see her again.
Over the years, we repeatedly tried to find her.
I always wondered how she was doing, if she was thriving, if she was happy. Many years passed. She was in my thoughts and in my heart.
Hey!
Oh my gosh.
And finally, she got in touch with me.
It's been so long.
Now, 33 years old, she calls herself Sabrina.
Look at you.
And is married with 4 children.
What have you been doing over the last 21 years?
Making babies.
So beautiful.
We met near her home in North Carolina.
We have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had 1,000 questions for Sabrina. How did she end up here? What she says happened on that deck that day, and what she thought went wrong with Jesse and Crystal.
You liked her.
I did.
You liked him.
I did. It was a family that said, hey, I will adopt this child and I would like to give them a home and they will love me for who I am.
But to Sabrina back then, it seemed that Joshua was always the favorite.
Did that create any jealousy?
It didn't create jealousy. I felt more down. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I wasn't this child that they wanted because I was older. I had my own feelings. I already had a history, you know. I loved that he was getting loved and he was having a family. Yes, it sucked for me.
You didn't have an emotional connection with Crystal and Jesse?
Because Joshua was so centered, I think we lost it. I think it was just lost. I was starting to become very depressed. It came to the point I was very suicidal.
Suicidal?
I was very suicidal. There were days I tried to attempt multiple times and I just couldn't do it. That's when I started creating a story. I told Crystal, you know, I'm seeing and hearing things.
Are you seeing something now? Did you see something earlier?
Because I wanted out. I wanted out.
So were you hallucinating at that time?
No. No hearing, no seeing things. It was just a child trying to get out.
She had him in her hands and was going to throw him over the deck.
And as for what happened on the deck, Sabrina has a decidedly different version of events from Crystal that she says started when Crystal asked her to get Joshua.
Crystal was gardening and Joshua was screaming on top of the deck. And Crystal said, I need you to go get Joshua. Trying to pick up a child that's really almost as big as you is kind of hard. So I'm trying to walk down the steps, just able to hold him so he doesn't fall. Crystal looked and she said,
Put him down, Carolee.
Put him down.
Put him down.
I eventually put him down and she's like, you tried to kill him, didn't you? And I said, no, I was trying to pick him up so he doesn't fall because he was sliding off my hands. And she's like, no, you were trying to kill him. And she kept saying it and I said, yes. So I finally said yes.
Sabrina repeated that story that she tried to kill Joshua to everyone, including me.
What happened that day out on the deck?
I saw him push over the deck.
You're trying to push him off the deck?
Try to kill Joshua.
What happened on that deck seemed to take on a life of its own. Crystal brought Sabrina to various doctors.
I went to psychiatrist after psychiatrist, and I remember Crystal say, just remember you wanted to kill Joshua. I said, okay, I will tell him.
Dr. Kennedy said you were potentially schizophrenic, bipolar, you had homicidal tendencies, and you were a danger to this family.
That's hard to hear. If I wanted to hurt somebody, it would have been done, and that never happened. I'm not that person. I was never that person.
Today, Sabrina says she is not on any medication and suffers from no mental illness. A number of doctors back then, though, seemed to think she needed help. We tried to contact Dr. Kennedy, but have been unable to reach him.
You were also accused of trying to kill the family dog.
I don't know where that came from, because I love that dog.
It's okay.
How did you learn that you were going back to Russia?
Crystal said they were running out of options, and they think the Russian Institute will be better.
So how is it going here?
Not good.
Not good? Why?
How did that make you feel when you were sitting there in the hospital in Moscow, waiting for them to return to pick you up, and they didn't?
I knew they weren't coming.
I felt so guilty because I wanted to take you. But what can I do?
I wanted you to take me. I was like, why is nobody taking me? I just wanted out.
Sabrina said she cried and was frightened.
I felt like I was in jail. But then I think of it, I put myself there. You know, all those lying and doing what they want me to do, I put myself there.
Then, after 2 months, it was Nina Costina from the adoption agency who arrived at the Institute.
Nina showed up, and she brought me clothes. She asked me if I remembered her.
And she took Sabrina to live with her in Virginia. Eventually, Sabrina moved in with a new set of parents in North Carolina.
I have parents. They're the parents that took me in, that took their time to learn who I am and make me a better person.
After high school, she volunteered for the nonprofit Mercy Ships and spent 2 years in Africa helping to provide medical care to underprivileged people.
Loved it.
Really?
I did.
When she returned home in 2010, she got a job in a hospital. And at church, she met math teacher Phil Caldwell.
I fell in love with him when I saw him interact with kids. The way he was treating them, how committed he was.
She's just very real and very genuine. And I love that about her.
But before she would even consider getting engaged, she insisted that Phil watch the original 48 Hours show about her early life.
My heart broke for her. I really couldn't believe all of the things that she had gone through. I think she expected me to run, but it was the opposite reaction of what she expected me to think.
They married in 2014 and now have 3 lovely daughters and a newborn son.
Fun kids. Love them.
She's very loving and she's very caring.
That looks real good.
And I think probably what Sabrina went through has had a greater impact on her parenting than she can see herself.
You go, girl.
Because she is so amazing at it.
You are doing it all by yourself.
Phil recently stopped teaching and started a new job at the same hospital where his wife works.
Seems like you're in a really good place.
I am.
Sabrina. You're happy.
I am.
But Sabrina, like me, has always wondered what happened to Crystal and Jesse. And she says that after 2 decades, she was ready to find out. After she became a mother, Sabrina says she wanted Crystal and Jesse to know she had a family of her own, and she wanted to share her side of the story. She found Crystal on social media and finally hit the send button.
I'd sent her a message stating to her that I hope she's well, and I just want to make this really clear for you. I've never wanted to hurt Joshua, and I never heard or saw things in my life.
And how did she respond?
She said she prayed that I would have a better family.
Did you love Crystal and Jesse?
I did, and I still have a high respect for them. Putting myself in their shoes, I would have probably done almost the same thing.
But not everything.
I would never take a child back.
Still, she says, She harbors no hard feelings toward them.
I learned to forgive my past. I have an amazing husband. I can't thank God enough for him. I have amazing kids. But if I didn't go through what I went through, I wouldn't have that.
Sabrina says Crystal and Jesse have 3 biological daughters of their own, along with Joshua. They declined our request for an interview. However, Jesse said that he and Crystal were glad Sabrina's life had turned out so well, and that Joshua was now a father too.
Hi, girls.
In the end, it appears that Crystal and Jesse, like Sabrina, eventually found families and happiness. And, as it turned out, so did I.
Don't be scared, okay?
And my journey started the minute I left Sabrina in Russia.
I cried as I was leaving. Then I started saying to myself, you know, maybe one day I can rescue an older child.
But the timing wasn't right. I was single, and as a CBS News correspondent, I was still traveling endlessly.
Then I had a story in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I went to an orphanage there to make a donation. I said, you know what? I'm close to 40 now. I'm gonna go for it.
In 2003, I became certified to adopt a child and learned about a woman in Djibouti, Africa, who wanted to find someone to adopt her 4-year-old son.
And I looked at his photo, and the resemblance was uncanny. This looks like my kid.
I had been to Africa twice and never heard of Djibouti. But that Thanksgiving, I flew there to meet this young boy and his mother. His name was Ayhanli Kadra Mahmoud Abdi.
I noticed that his eyes danced. That's a signal that he's smart. He's clever.
His mother was Kadra. She gave birth to her son after a short affair with a French soldier. And ever since then, she feared for the boy's safety because he was mixed race.
They were homeless and living in an abandoned building. He was sleeping on the floor, and so was she. Begging was his routine.
I took them to lunch, and over the course of the next 2 weeks, I got to know them.
I began bonding over hamburgers and fries and walking around on the street.
He spoke 4 languages, but not English.
We mined, like, let's eat. You need to go home to sleep. I mean, that's how basic it was.
Fortunately, there was a bowling alley and a small beach at a nearby military base.
We went bowling a lot, which something he'd never done before. We didn't know how to swim, so we took a boat to this small little beach island that was reserved for the military personnel.
I made 2 more lengthy visits to Djibouti, but when it came time for the adoption, there was a problem.
Kadra never signed her name before. She didn't know how to sign her name. She practiced over and over again, you know, over and over again. And it was such a loving and selfless act. The attorney sitting next to us said to Kadra, "Troy will be a good father." And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "Time will tell."
My name is Jonah Gray Roberts, and my father is Troy Roberts.
That's the street you lived on in Djibouti.
The whole adoption process, I was 4 years old. There wasn't really much to tell a 4-year-old.
You are.
I was just, there's a man here who's, taking care of me, who's feeding me. He also did get me a tutor, so I was getting education. At that age, you don't really think anything about it. You're just, this could be, my long-lost dad.
And then 10 months after meeting my son, it was finally time to go.
That was an intense day. I'm thousands of feet in the air. This is my first time ever on an airplane. Then my dad tells me, oh, we're in New York City. This is your new home. And I remember seeing my first home, my first real home. And he's like, this is your room. It's my own bed. I didn't have to share with anyone. I had a desk, a place where I started studying, had the tutors. It was amazing.
We did everything together, so much together. I really enjoyed watching him learn new things and introducing him to a whole new world.
There was never father and adopted son. It was always, father and son.
And like any father, I have a lot to learn from my son.
Who needs 3 monitors, Jonah?
I do. You don't understand technology.
Empty breeder. We're refrigerating plastic. What can I do?
You just stand there. Every Thanksgiving, we have this thing where before we start eating, after I've made the full meal, because he doesn't know how to cook, we would always start off by saying what we're grateful for this year.
And now, when I think about Sabrina's journey, and Crystal and Jesse's, and Jonah's, and my own, I realize how much we all have to be thankful for.
It seems like everyone's story has a happy ending. And that's pretty cool,
48 hours. Don't miss an episode.
It took nearly 24 hours to recover all the bodies from inside the ruins of Rhode Island's Station Nightclub.
Horrible things happen to people for absolutely no reason.
The death toll was far greater than anyone expected.
We went out on a Thursday night to listen to music, drink some beers, and have a good time. And a quarter of those people didn't get to go home, ever. This is what I live with. I don't hide it. 2nd and 3rd degree burns over 34% of my body from the heat. I'm lucky I even have arms.
It was a neighborhood club for live music. The people who went to that club were regulars.
The headliner was Jack Russell's Great White. You really had to work your way through the crowd. It was packed. I'm standing 3 rows back from the edge of the stage.
We're just waiting, and then it gets dark. The music starts.
The pyrotechnics went off, and I remember being a little shocked. It just felt really big. And I just sort of noticed some flame on the walls on either side.
And then it kept growing. When that fire alarm went off, that's when I said to myself, and I remember the words, this isn't good. This is not going to be good. This is bad. It went from 0 to 10 in what seemed like a second, and then the building's, completely engulfed.
We have a mass casualty incident here. Who do? fully engulfed building. We have people on fire inside. There are a lot of walking wounded.
Literally laid there, said, God, just take care of my family because I knew I was going to die.
100 lives were taken. More than 200 people were hurt.
It's hard to describe the level of agony. The state of Rhode Island is small, and it feels like somebody knew somebody who was in that fire or knew somebody who did. And so the pain is very personal.
We realize there's very little we can say that will provide comfort to the thousands.
No one meant for this to happen.
Brothers Jeffrey and Michael Gadarian, co-owners of the club, are both charged with involuntary manslaughter.
What is your reaction to the indictment?
Taking responsibility for your actions goes a long way.
And you don't feel the brothers have ever accepted responsibility.
True.
People who were key to understanding this tragedy had remained silent.
Why are you sitting here talking to me?
I think we're sitting here talking to you because we wanted the full story to come out, and that for people who want to come to their own conclusion on what happened that night.
Hopped out of bed, grabbed my clothes, grabbed my keys, hopped in the car, and took off.
On February 20th, 2003, at about 11:10 p.m., Jody King got a call that something was going on at the Station Nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island. But he didn't know what.
I gotta find Trace.
He was worried about his brother Tracy, who worked there as a bouncer.
As I went by the fire station, fire trucks are coming out. Now the question in my head is, why are all these fire trucks leaving?
When Jody arrived, he saw the devastating scene.
I see the horror, and it was ugly. The roof was caving in, walls were caving in, body after body in front of me. I don't even like to talk about it.
It would become one of the deadliest fires in a club in U.S. history.
It should not have happened. It was completely preventable.
Scott James has written a book about the tragedy called Trial by Fire.
I decided I would just start asking some questions.
Describe the Station Nightclub for me. What kind of club was this?
It was a typical kind of roadside dive.
These are videos from prior performances taken inside the club.
It smelled like spilled beer and stale cigarettes, and everything was just a little bit frayed at the edge. But it's fun.
The night of the fire, hundreds of people gathered at the station to see Great White, an 80s band, now with some new members, led by singer Jack Russell, known mainly for their hit, Once Bitten, Twice Shy.
They had their moment, and they played the arenas. That was in like the 80s. But, you know, they have a following to this day.
Were you a fan of the band Great White?
Yes, definitely.
Linda Slaten was a regular at the station. That evening, she had a girls' night out with a friend while her young daughter was at a sleepover.
The night of the fire, I got in for free. I was asked to work the merch table for the band, so I was getting $40 and 2 t-shirts. And I was paying staff pricing for beer, because I knew a guy.
Also there that night was Bates College student Phil Barr, who was home for winter break.
You know, just have a beer, see a concert.
Phil, who was in his junior year, had dreams of a career on Wall Street and swam competitively for his college swim team.
I loved it. It was really everything to me at that time.
Unlike many of the patrons there, this was Phil's first time at the club. He arrived early, around 8:30 p.m.
there really weren't that many people around early in the night. So I actually got a really good sense of the layout of the venue.
When people arrived, they walked through this entrance and this kind of longish hallway. You'd see on your left a horseshoe-shaped bar. This was the main bar where you could get your drinks. To the right was this much larger space in front of a stage. You have 4 exits. There's an exit near the stage. We have an exit through the kitchen, one near the bar, and then the main exit, that hallway where everybody came through.
The station was owned by brothers Michael and Jeff Dadarian. They're speaking out about the fire for the first time. Their story starts 3 years before the fire.
Either of you know anything about running a nightclub?
Zero.
No.
Couldn't play an instrument.
The Dadarians bought the club as an investment.
Jeffrey was responsible for all of the marketing activities, and I was responsible kind of for the day-to-day.
Both the brothers had other jobs. Michael owned a financial services business.
We're live in Wakefield tonight. I'm Jeff Dadarian.
Jeff was a local news reporter.
Every time.
For years, he'd worked in Boston for Channel 7.
We're live in Attleboro this morning. I'm Jeff Dadarian.
At the time of the fire, he had just started a new job, closer to home in Providence, at the local CBS station. That night, he allowed a cameraman to shoot footage inside the club for an upcoming story about safety in public venues.
How ironic is that?
Unbelievable.
Right.
48 Hours is not showing any of that footage. But that night, leading the cameraman around was bouncer Tracy King, a dedicated husband and father of 3 young boys.
He was gregarious, he was out there, and he just loved being in the center.
Tracy liked to entertain people with his unique talent. A surgery to correct a childhood ailment with his ears left him able to balance objects on his chin.
Tracy King, ladies and gentlemen.
He went on David Letterman twice to do stupid human tricks.
You're going to balance it on your chin?
Yes.
All right.
When he walked into a room, if there wasn't a smile, he'd start balancing stuff to get you uplifted and smiling. That was his gift.
Jody says his brother enjoyed working for the Dadarians. They were friends.
He trusted the club. He trusted the owners. He trusted in his friends.
Were you making money?
Not really.
The Dadarians say, despite their love for the club, the business had peaked, and they were in the process of selling it.
The club was sold. It was already in contract. Purchase and sale had been signed.
But their plans for the future would suddenly change. As Great White started their first song, their tour manager, Daniel Beakley, set off 4 large fireworks called gerbs.
They are what they call 15 by 15. They go for 15 seconds and they go 15 feet into the air. So it was not a great decision to use these inside a nightclub that only has 12-foot ceilings.
Seconds later, flames appeared on the back wall.
Most of the crowd thought it was part of the show and didn't move. People didn't react instantly.
But Jeff, who was helping out at the bar, says he and an employee tried to get to the stage with a fire extinguisher.
We tried to get as far as we could. We couldn't make it.
About 40 seconds after the song began, Great White stopped the show, and all but one member of the band escaped through the stage door exit. That exit door would soon be engulfed in flames.
The fire alarm, you hear it kick in, and that's when the crowd realizes this is a real danger and we have got to get out of there.
Hundreds of people ran to the only exit many of them knew, the way they came in.
It's like a riptide. It's a surge of bodies.
The fire was now out of control. It had spread along the foam that lined the walls and ceiling, intended to dampen sound.
The foam was raining down, and the flames are dripping from the ceiling. It looked like it was raining black fire.
They only have about 60 seconds to get out of that building if they're going to live.
This is what the station fire looked like about 15 minutes after it began. Those who were trapped inside when the flames started knew they needed to get out fast.
I remember the smoke descended really quickly.
One of those people was Phil Barr.
We kind of crouched down behind some of the people in front of us. You could not see your hand in front of your face. That's how thick the smoke was. Once you could no longer see, it was total pandemonium.
Phil was located between the stage and the front door.
A lot of people moved back towards the main entrance. It became really clear that we were not going to be able to get out the front door. Since I had been there earlier in the night, I knew that there was at least an exit in the back bar room. That is the furthest exit away from the stage, but it's a relatively straight line. I went around the people trying to push to the front door into the main bar room. I remember getting pushed from behind, and I tripped over what I assumed was a bar stool, and I just kind of went down on my face. It became very, very hard to breathe.
Lying on the floor, not far from the Horseshoe Bar, Phil lost consciousness.
The bar got quiet because people were dying, literally. And all you could hear was the roar of the fire and liquor bottles exploding.
Linda Saran and her friend Deb were in the atrium, huddled together under a table.
I said, you know what? We're running out of time. And I knew the window was to my left. So I said to Deb, stay here, I'll be right back. And I stood up, I went over, put my hands against the glass, and I started kicking at that window. And it wouldn't break. I went and laid down next to Deb and just waited to die.
Did you have enough time to form those complete thoughts?
Yes. I thought how terrible it was that my daughter was going to grow up without her mom. And I heard, and out Deb went. It was like, what? And then outside I went, cold air washing over me.
An off-duty police officer standing outside had heard her kicking at the window. He got a tire iron from his car, smashed the glass, and started pulling people out.
When I first went out the window, I landed on the stairs. I couldn't get up. And I said, my hands won't work. And that's when I noticed the black on my arms. It looked like a ladder of those black jelly bracelets from the 80s, hanging in rings around my wrists. And I took a good look and I said, oh, I'm burned.
I couldn't hear alarms, I couldn't hear noise, I couldn't hear screaming anymore.
Phil Barr says when he came to, he felt excruciating pain near the base of his spine and burning on his face.
I don't like to talk about it, but I remember feeling weight on top of me, and I'm pretty sure I crawled out from under another person to pull myself up. I ran across the room and I ran face first into the wall. And I felt the door and I just heaved my shoulder into it and I fell down the stairs out that door.
Phil was now outside, but he felt like his lungs were on fire.
It was getting harder and harder to breathe. I could feel tightness and constriction in my chest, some bleeding I could notice in my throat.
Also outside was club owner Jeff Dedarian. He says he managed to escape through the front door before a stampede of people got stuck in the narrow hallway and blocked the exit.
I remember we were trying to get people away from the building, like get away from the building. It was happening so fast. That's all I just can keep seeing in my head. And the roof and just everything, just fast, too fast.
Jeff called his brother Michael, who was in Florida.
He's completely out of it. out of it. I couldn't understand him or understand the magnitude of what was going on there. And I'm saying to him, did everybody get out? Did anybody die, you know? And he's like, he don't know. He's like, he don't know. He don't know. Doesn't know.
Anybody see Tracy? I have to find him.
At the scene, Jody King was desperate for information about his brother and began to fear the worst.
I spent the next 5 or 6 hours going back and forth in the parking lot, talking to firemen, asking firemen, can you please pull the sheets back for me? I don't care what I'm going to see.
Linda Saran and Phil Barr, badly injured, were transported to a local hospital.
We have 39 confirmed fatalities. We're still in the process of searching the rubble.
It is now well over 50.
We're now at 65.
Then it may be higher.
Can you come in? They want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay.
The night of the fire, Jeff gave a statement to the local police and another one to an investigator with the Attorney General's office.
Remember, I'm still in Florida.
Michael also spoke via phone to an investigator.
Do you feel, oh my goodness, we're in trouble?
No. No. Nope.
Why?
Because in my mind, I had nothing to hide. If I had nothing to hide, then why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you talk to them and tell them what you knew or what you didn't know?
Three days after the station fire, Jody King finally got the news that his brother Tracy's body had been found. In the months and years that followed, Jody also learned about Tracy's heroic last moments.
He ran in and came out 9 times in 90 seconds.
How do you know that he went in 9 times?
9 different families have come up to me and said, thank you for having a great brother. He threw my wife, my cousin, my uncle, my sister out a window. What a great brother you have. You should be proud. I am proud.
In the days after the fire, victims' families and survivors faced a harsh new reality. Phil Barr awoke after 3 weeks in a medically induced coma and was told his lungs had been badly damaged.
When you come to, you're in a hospital room.
Yep. My dad was in the room. I can't speak. Everything was sore and hoarse. I picked up the pen and in very weak, kind of handwriting, I wrote, I hope to make progress every day.
Where'd that come from?
Don't know.
True to his words, Phil fought to breathe on his own, and then, ever so slowly, he learned to walk again. But even more than walking, Phil wanted to return to swimming.
I asked my pulmonologist, when can I get back in the pool? He was very kind about it, but he said, I don't ever see you competitively swimming again. I refused to accept that as the outcome.
About a month after the fire, Phil went home from the hospital. And the following year, he was able to accomplish the impossible and rejoin his swim team. He had an unlikely friend rooting for him.
I want to ask you about Phil Barr. How'd you meet him?
My hospital roommate. He and I took turns driving the respiratory therapists crazy. In some ways, it's almost like being in war together. Like you feel that kinship, that, God, I really hope this guy makes it. And yet, at the point in time, I don't even think I knew his name.
Like Phil, Linda had also spent 3 weeks in a medically induced coma.
Second and third degree burns over 34% of my body from the heat. I literally baked alive. Then as it heals, the scarring tightens up. So before I knew it, this finger was contractured down in this position, and the rest of them were all bent backwards because the skin had tightened up. So the only way to pick up a can of soda would be to do this. I had no control over my muscles. And that's when it starts to hit you, all that you've lost.
And that's when the despair sinks in.
That's when you make a decision. Am I going to sit here and cry about this? My friends were dead. My other friends are severely injured. I no longer look like myself, but I made a choice. I'm going to do this.
Linda was one of the more than 200 who were seriously hurt in the fire. A staggering 100 lives were lost. Almost immediately, the finger-pointing started.
Rock and roll's supposed to be fun, not deadly, you know?
The morning after the fire, the lead singer of Great White, Jack Russell, claimed the brothers had given the band permission to set off the fireworks.
We never do anything without asking permission first.
No permission was ever requested by the band or any of its agents to use pyrotechnics at the station, and no permission was ever given.
The following day, the brothers responded at a press conference.
Many people didn't make it out, and that is a horror that will haunt my family and I for the rest of our lives.
We have an investigation ongoing, and we need help. We need answers, and I'm trying to get them.
Rhode Island Attorney General Patrick Lynch opened an investigation and convened a grand jury to determine if anyone should face criminal charges.
Certainly there are people that we're looking at. Ultimately, we may target.
Now in private practice, Lynch says he looked into a host of people.
I don't think anybody, in anything that they did, wanted anybody to die that night or get injured. But does that mean it's not a crime? The answer is no.
One of the angles Lynch investigated was the Dadarian brothers.
They were running the operation, they promoted the event, so it was very quickly, they were in the circle of people we should look at.
Over the course of the investigation, what did you learn about the way the brothers ran their business?
Looking back on it, I would say they ran it as a side business, an attempt to maybe make some extra money with a callous, utter disregard for those that work there and assemble there.
The biggest question was, why had the fire spread so quickly? To satisfy noise complaints from neighbors, the brothers had installed foam along the club's walls and ceilings. As it turns out, the foam they used was highly flammable.
The type of foam was equal to gallons of gasoline. It was liquid fire.
Who's responsible for that foam going up on the wall?
Jeffrey and Michael Dadarian.
Lynch also points out that the exits were a safety issue. Inspection records showed that just 3 months before the fire, the Dadarians had been cited by the local fire marshal for having a secondary interior door by the stage that opened inward, which violated regulations. They were told to take it down, but the night of the fire, it was up to help cut down the noise.
Not only was the door up, which it shouldn't have been, opened inward, which it shouldn't have, it was covered in foam, it was also on fire. And that door being up, there is no question that that increased the likelihood that many, many more would perish.
In December 2003, 9 months after the fire, Jeff and Michael Dadarian were in court, each charged with 200 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
How do you plead?
I plead not guilty, Your Honor.
100 for criminal negligence and 100 for misdemeanor manslaughter.
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Great White's tour manager, Daniel Beakley, also faced the same charges. He had failed to get a license for the pyrotechnics from the state of Rhode Island and permits from the local fire department.
They blamed 3. They should have blamed more. There are other people who should be responsible.
In February of 2006, 3 years after this Station Nightclub burned down, many in Rhode Island were shocked to learn that instead of a trial, A plea deal had been reached with Daniel Beakley, the tour manager for the band Great White.
I don't know that I'll ever forgive myself for what happened that night. So I can't expect anybody else to.
Beakley pled guilty to 100 counts of misdemeanor manslaughter and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was granted parole and then released after 22 months.
There is so much pain and heartache that happened on our doorstep.
Michael and Jeff Dedarian pled no contest to 100 counts of misdemeanor manslaughter and agreed to a deal.
There's so many things that factor into the decision to do that.
It would have been horrific to have people go through this. And then we've got the pressure from the judge saying that, you're going to go to jail for 30 years apiece.
The brothers' plea deal stated only one of them would go to prison. The brothers decided that because Jeff had young kids, Michael would go. He spent 33 months in prison, while Jeff had to do 500 hours of community service.
We never knew the whole story because the trial never happened. So everything really never came out.
There are so many people still to this day angry that the case didn't go to trial. Do
Correct.
you understand that anger?
We do understand that anger, and that's why we're here with you.
And 18 years after the fire, the brothers say they want to set the record straight and reveal new information.
If you have a message that you want the people of Rhode Island to hear, there were plenty of ways to get it out long before now.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. First of all, I don't know how would you accomplish the detail and the amount of new information in a news conference or, a commercial or something that we would try and do on our own.
For the Dedarians, the full story begins with the issue of permission. The brothers have always maintained that they never gave the band permission to use pyrotechnics.
Was there a contract?
Yes.
Did the contract specify the use of pyrotechnics?
No. Did not. These contracts are pretty specific, so I would think that the pyrotechnic provision would be in there, just like we need to have, 12 M&Ms. And they need to be brown.
According to author Scott James, Great White had reportedly used a large pyro display without permission at other clubs, including just days before the fire at a show in New Jersey.
And the nightclub operator there was so angry when he saw what had happened in Rhode Island, he went public, and he even made public the contract that he had with Great White that showed that there was no evidence of fireworks that were going to be part of the show.
Then there's that interior, inward-swinging door by the stage that former Attorney General Patrick Lynch says was responsible for loss of life the night of the fire.
And I don't think there's any question that had that door not been up, a significant number of people would have survived.
That door was meant to block the noise from the neighbors. And so when the fire inspector came in and said that that door had to come down, the door did come down. But then the door would go back up when it was going to be a loud night. It didn't have a lock on it. There was nothing that would make it so you couldn't get out of it.
And according to the brothers, it was one of the first exits used when the fire started.
That door was opened immediately, and that's where the band went out.
But that door became impassable almost within seconds because clearly there's foam that's burning at 1,800 or 1,500 degrees.
And then it just got engulfed in fire.
Correct. You weren't approaching that area at all.
And then there's the foam.
The fire spread so quickly because rather than fire retardant sound foam, on the wall of the club was highly flammable packing foam.
That is correct. Undisputable.
The brothers sent a fax to the foam company specifically asking for sound foam. But what they received was highly flammable packing foam.
The brothers say, wait a minute, we ordered sound foam. How is it our responsibility if they gave us the wrong foam?
First of all, I think it's pathetic, disgusting, and unsettling to think that they're even speaking now. The foam that they put up had a direct impact on the survivability of the bulk of the people that were assembled that night.
The Dedarians say that in the 3 years they owned the club, no one ever questioned the safety of the foam. And they're quick to point out the club was inspected by their insurance company and multiple times by the local fire marshal, Dennis LaRocque.
He finds the deficiencies, you have to correct the deficiencies, and then signs off so that you can get your liquor license. That happened in 2000, that happened in 2001, and that happened in 2002.
The brothers have since learned that the fire marshal should have tested the foam on the wall.
The field test is crystal clear. You take 1 square inch of the foam, you hold it up with a roach clip, and light it on fire with a wooden match. That's what the code says. That specific.
Did he do that?
0.
None of the inspections and then follow-up inspections. If he had done that, then he would have obviously have said to us,
take this stuff down, this is solid gasoline.
This is flammable, you can't have this.
When LaRocque testified before the grand jury, he claimed he never saw the foam. The brothers, however, find that hard to believe, considering the foam covered the walls, ceiling, and even the inward swinging door he cited as a violation.
Did he do his job perfectly? Absolutely not.
According to Lynch, under Rhode Island law, the fire marshal could not be criminally charged unless there was evidence of bad faith or malice.
While troubling, while concerning, maddening, it doesn't mean that somebody should be charged or can be.
If the brothers are relying on the fire marshal to tell them whether or not they can continue to do business, and he says you can, isn't that an important fact in determining who's at fault?
Again, any reference in this conversation about what the brothers say, I take a step back and think, I don't really trust it.
But many, including the brothers, feel strongly LaRocque should also have been charged.
Why is it okay that the fire marshal is allowed to miss something or make a mistake, and what he did was just an oops, but what we did was criminal?
And why wasn't the foam company charged? The brothers say there was evidence that the grand jury never heard. Two years after the fire at the Station Nightclub, the Dedarians learned about a piece of evidence they say is important that was never presented to the grand jury. This 8-page fax, sent to the Attorney General's office anonymously just months after the fire, entitled "The Fire, the Foam."
They got this fax, and it went on to describe the business practices of the foam company.
Investigators eventually discovered the fax was sent by Barry Warner, a former employee at American Foam, the company that had sent the Dedarians the packing foam made of flammable polyurethane. Warner lived next to the station and had met the brothers.
He writes up this long, almost a manifesto about all the things that he thinks are wrong in that foam company that led to this tragedy.
He wrote, "This is a company that is well aware of the dangers of polyurethane foam. This is a company that did little to educate their employees about the limits of polyurethane foam. In fact, they did the opposite."
When the foam came, was there anything on the packaging that indicated that it was highly flammable?
0.
No, nothing.
But when Warner was called before the grand jury, he was not asked about the allegations he made in the fax.
They didn't even bring up the facts to him. They didn't even let him talk about it.
Mr. Warner's fax wasn't presented to the grand jury, correct?
I can't remember, honestly.
Why wouldn't it be?
You're telling me it wasn't, and I don't know that it wasn't.
48 Hours has confirmed the fax was not presented to the grand jury. Regardless, Lynch points out the Dedarians still chose to take a plea deal instead of going to trial.
The defendant has every right to go to trial and say, hey, if it's this mysterious fax that's trying to be referenced today, 18 years later, hey, this is important.
American Foam said Warner's claims about the company are false. And while they weren't charged in the criminal case, survivors and victims' families sued them in civil court for not warning the Dedarians the foam they sent them was flammable. The company paid a hefty settlement, And they weren't the only ones. At least 64 others were also sued, including the state of Rhode Island, cited for the fire inspector's failure to report the flammable foam during multiple inspections. In the end, the survivors and victims' families settled for a total of $176 million. Great White was part of the lawsuit and settled for $1 million. Jack Russell declined our request for an interview. 18 years later, there is no consensus among survivors when it comes to blame. Linda still places much of it on the Dedarian brothers.
They have said they were sorry, but never once do they say, we screwed up. If they stood up and said, small business owners, we were inexperienced, we took shortcuts, we screwed up, I would forgive them in a heartbeat.
To people who feel that the two of you have never said, we own this, what do you say?
We say that we're sorry for all of it, and if we could change it, we would.
You know, a day doesn't go by that we don't think about it in some way, shape, or form. So, to the people who think we don't own it, I'm telling you, we do own it, okay?
Yeah.
We own it.
Every day.
We own it every day.
Does that mean you feel a sense of responsibility?
We feel a sense of guilt about what happened, in the sense that you carry the guilt of knowing that these people aren't here anymore and these people are hurt for the rest of their life. There isn't a guilt in terms of like that we knowingly did this or you know, caused it, but there's a guilt of that it happened on our watch. Happened on our watch. As a human being, how do you not feel some sort of responsibility for that?
Pretty girls, look what Mama's got. I could have missed it all. I could have missed my daughter's high school graduation, the birth of her children. I could have missed that. My friends that didn't survive that night have missed that.
Linda will forever wear the scars of that horrible night, but she refuses to live in the past.
I think a lot of people miss out on the moments.
Not you.
No, not anymore.
Being a survivor of the Station Nightclub Fire is a piece of who I am. It fuels you.
Ready, set, here we go!
Today, Phil is married and a father of 2 little girls.
I'm catching up.
Getting another opportunity to live my life came with enormous responsibility. It's not just about hitting the next goal, but doing something really meaningful. Because so many people that were there don't have that opportunity.
In 2017, a memorial was opened to honor the 100 innocent lives that were tragically lost in the station fire, including Tracy King, who died saving so many others.
I'm so proud to say he's my brother.
Hey, Trace. That's my buddy.
My parents taught us a lot of things. One of them is never say die, never give up.
Miss you, Trace.
Tracy died, never giving up.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode."